Another building block of the thinking environment is dialogue pairs. So one of the ways I think about dialogue pairs is it's moving back into the world of exchange thinking, having been in the world of fully independent thinking and creating that experience for each other in thinking pairs where each person has their own discrete turn. They're thinking about what they want to think about, and their topic is not connected to the topic that their thinking partner then chooses to think about. So in thinking pairs, we are both in the world of our own fully independent thinking, and the person listening to us is listening to ignite our thinking and keep us going. Once we move back into the world of exchange thinking, the building block that makes the most sense is that of dialogue pairs. And the difference between thinking pairs and dialogue pairs is that in a dialogue pair, you've got two people thinking together about the same topic. And because we know that the mind thinks best in the presence of a question, what you will do with the topic before you get started is turn it into a question. And I'm going to speak about how to craft good questions for dialogue in my video, which is called Issues into Questions. So once you've got your dialogue question, the way a dialogue pair works is that one person asks the other person that question to get them thinking. What do you think about this question? So they pose the question to the person that they're in a dialogue with, and of course, that person's going to start thinking about it. And what matters then is that the person that's posed the question is being a thinking partner. And we know already that what that means is they're going to be listening to ignite, they're going to be managing the three streams of attention. And of course, that becomes a little bit challenging in dialogue because when you're in a thinking pair, you know you're not going to reply to the topic that your person that you're listening to is thinking about. But when you're in a dialogue pair, you know you are going to reply at some point. At some point, the person who's thinking is going to stop their turn and ask you what you think about the same question, because that's the point of a dialogue, for two people to be thinking together. And so the managing of three streams of attention in a dialogue pair becomes a little bit more challenging. You have to notice that as you're listening to the person and their thoughts on the question, your thinking is going to be being sparked. You're going to be getting ideas about what you think in response to what they think. And the trick here is going to be that you notice what's happening in your response stream and bring yourself back to being genuinely interested in their thinking and where their thinking is going. The other thing that's, of course, hugely important in a dialogue pair in order for it to work well is that if you're the person who's taking their turn in the dialogue, at some point, in keeping with the component of equality, you're going to need to remember to stop your turn and hand it over to the other person who's thinking with you about the same question. And when people first start practicing dialogue pairs, I actually recommend that they do that handover explicitly with the question, what do you think? So the way a dialogue pair looks is you generate the question, you decide what the topic is that you want to think about together, you generate the question. One person asks the other person that question to get them going. That person takes a turn to say what they think. At some point, they remember that it's important to find out what the other person thinks. They stop their turn. They hand it over with the question, so what do you think? And now the person that's been listening has a turn to think, and the person who was thinking becomes their thinking partner and gets interested in their thinking. And the same thing happens. At some point, the person who's now thinking has to remember to stop their turn and hand it back. And so what starts to happen, in fact, is mini thinking turns being handed back and forth between two people with genuine interest in where the other person's thinking is going, and noticing that you don't slip into listening to reply and that you don't start expressing what Nancy Klein calls the irrepressible urge to speak through your body language, because that's not going to do much for the component of ease. And what starts to happen in good quality thinking environment dialogue is that people build on each other's ideas, and it's almost as if a third person enters in. The dialogue itself starts to emerge. The field between the two people's minds starts to generate this third entity called the dialogue itself, where ideas that you didn't know you had and weren't expecting start to emerge. And in really good thinking environment dialogue, because you're treating each other as mattering equally, you're treating each other as thinking peers, you stop being worried about who's going to be the one to come up with a good idea. You start enjoying each other's thinking so much that the ideas just start to emerge between you. And because there's ease and you're both sustaining the promise of no interruption, you're both really experiencing having time to think in the dialogue, as opposed to what often happens in conversation, which is a sort of uncomfortable urgency about when you're going to get your turn and how to enter in, and the inevitable finishing of each other's sentences, which can often result in interruption and the killing off of ideas as opposed to the generating of them. And that's dialogue in a thinking environment.